Okay, Alexander, let's talk once again about the G20 and the COP26. And let's focus in on Biden. Maybe talk a little bit about Biden's ratings, which continue to fall. I don't know how much further they could go without getting into negative territory, I guess, at this rate. But there were a couple of funny, funny videos, a funny photo. But, outside of the comedy, it speaks to a larger problem, a bigger problem that the United States and the whole world is facing, and that is the vacuum of power and leadership in the White House. The funny video obviously was Biden sleeping during one of the speeches at the COP26 in Scotland, and he definitely dozed off. White House aides sent someone to kind of wake him up, pretending that he has an urgent thing to take a look at to wake him up, and. And coincidentally enough, as Biden was falling asleep, it was at the exact moment where the person giving the speech was saying, "And this is the most important topic the world is facing, the most important crisis the world is facing." And Biden falls asleep. All right, Trump is the guy sees in the future, because when he came up with the name Sleepy Joe, he got it. He got it right. So Trump says stuff, and for some weird reason, it comes true. I don't know what it is. Like Trump, hate Trump. It's a fact. When he says things, a year or two later, they come true. But anyway, so you have that incident. And then you had at the G20, before he flew to Scotland, everyone got on their private jets and polluted the world with their jets and their entourages and all that stuff. Their 85-car motorcade, rumbling through the streets of Italy. There was the photo that they took at the G20, and all the leaders are there. And Biden was all the way at the edge. I mean, he might as well have not have been in the photo, which is very odd considering it is the president of the United States who should be and has always been front and center. So, okay, there's a lot of poking at Biden and making fun of Biden, but there is a big problem here, and that is that the United States on the world stage is it's just not there. It's just not there.
Absolutely right. And can I just say, certainly the case that Trump can be very prescient at times, and he often is, on many topics. But, dial back a year or even longer than that, and, go to some of our programs that we were making last year, before the elections, and you will find that we were discussing this, and we were saying that this is going to be a real problem if the administration did indeed change. If Biden won, we would have in effect a kind of collective leadership situation in the United States, because we would not have a president who was fully in charge. Well, that is now visibly the case. We have a president who is not in charge. We've been talking about the vacuum of power in the administration, in the US government, at the very center of the US government since the administration changed. We've pointed out in program after program that the US political system, the constitutional system of the United States, depends upon a president who is active and is in control and is able to bring together the officials and is in a position to make the necessary instructions. If the president himself cannot do that, there is no one else who has the legal authority to do it in his place. There is no one who's able to just stand in for the president over a sustained period and act in place of the president. Because any person who does that, be it the vice president, the secretary of state, the chief of staff, the Senate majority leader, the House majority leader, whomever, they don't have the legal authority to do that. And any instructions they give, therefore, are not legally binding in the same way that the presidents are upon officials. So officials don't need to follow those instructions, and the system starts to seize up, and you start to see in this already very vociferous, very dysfunctional political system, governmental system that the United States has, you will see the different elements of the system, the different factions within the Democratic Party, the different departments of the US government, each going their own way, each conducting their separate policies without actually being bound together in a single team, because there is no one to bind them together. And that's exactly what we see. And as a result, that's communicating itself around the world. People are starting to sense that. Well, they haven't started to sense that. They know that is the case. And therefore, and for that reason, the President of the United States and the United States itself, in effect, are being sidelined. So we see top world leaders like Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Erdogan of Turkey, Kishida of Japan, are now staying away from summit meetings. Be absolutely clear, if there was a strong, dynamic president, somebody they could interact with from the United States, they would be coming, however strong their feelings about the situation, because they need to speak in that kind of situation to the person in charge, who is the US president. When the president isn't fully in charge, things drift and there's no point in them coming, so they stay away. And that's what's essentially happening. Now, beyond that, and on top of that, it's creating, I think, a great general crisis of the situation in the United States itself, because, of course, the Democratic Party is seeing the administration's poll numbers crash. It's seeing Biden's poll numbers crash. It's sensing that the situation isn't going particularly well. It's got an incredibly tough battle, gubernatorial battle, coming up in Virginia and in other places, which was not, I think, fully expected. And things are not looking good from the administration's point of view. And again, in that sort of situation, the Democrats need to project a strong president, somebody who's able to assume control, take charge, run things. Now, it's particularly bad, this particular incident, and, we can laugh about it, and let's actually laugh about it, because it does have its comedic side. But this particular incident of him dozing off, it is the president, Joe Biden himself, who made the issue that was being discussed at this summit meeting, the absolute, flagship issue of his presidency. He is the person who's been telling us all the time, he ran with it during the election, that this is, one of the most important issue in the world today. And, here he comes along and he has this meeting. All these world leaders are, there or not, as the case may be. You have this speech, from somebody says, this is the most important issue. And the President of the United States, again, is dozing off. I wonder how much longer this can continue for. I don't think, by the way, that there's any final point. I suspect his poll ratings are going to continue to fall as confidence drains away. But the question is, how long can this unsustainable situation, because it is unsustainable, how long can it continue for? And the Democrats have made things absolutely worse for everybody, because the person that they selected as vice president, who was selected for purely factional reasons, is somebody who doesn't command confidence and who doesn't have much popularity amongst the American people. So we have a bad situation from every conceivable point of view. The Democrats were enormously focused last year on winning the election. They pulled out all the stops in order to achieve it. And once they've won the election, what they've seen is that they had no real concept of how to put their incredibly ambitious plans into action. And the result is that everything is falling apart and they have no plan B.
Yeah, their plan A was just ill thought. I mean, they definitely had a plan. And when you go back to the Democrat primaries, the plan was, even though there were many people who were reluctant about it, the plan was we're going to run Joe Biden. He's going to win. And you remember in the same day, Buttigieg and Warren, they all dropped out.
Absolutely.
In the same day, they paved the way for Biden to get the nomination. Harris, who never even made it to the primaries, was given the vice president spot. Probably a deal between Obama, the Obama faction, the Democrats, and the Clinton faction. Who knows how they worked that out? But that was a plan. We're going to run Joe Biden. He's going to win it. Harris is going to be the VP, and eventually we're going to see within those 4 years, maybe at the end of the 4 years, maybe halfway in the 4 years, we're going to see some sort of transition from Biden to Harris, and then Harris is going to not only take over possibly for Biden's term, but she's going to run for another 2 terms. And the Democrats thought, everything is great. Everyone is happy, and that's our plan going forward. I guess they just never expected Biden to be that bad. And on the flip side, they never expected Harris to be that bad. Or maybe they did, and this is all part of the plan. An article you sent me from the Examiner, Alexander, has the title, Biden Faces Doubts About His Ability to Lead Democrats to Victory as Voter Pessimism Sets In. He has foreign policy problems, sure, but in the U.S. and with the economy, his problems are immense. So, I mean, he's just not doing good anywhere.
No, he's not. I'm going to say, I think that they did have a plan. The Democrats emphatically had a plan. Their plan was that they were going to win big in November. I don't mean just, the presidency. I think they were fully expecting that they would be able to ride the wave, and that they would sweep Congress, that they'd get big majorities in the House and in the Senate. They would then be able to implement a transformative program, changing the entire balance of constitutional and political power in the United States, reforming the Supreme Court, changing the voting system, all these extraordinary laws that they were going to pass, enacting this enormously ambitious economic and social program, which they had put together. And it didn't really matter, I suspect, for them whether the president himself was going to be a dynamic figure, because they thought that they would be so powerful after the election, with Congress completely under their control, that they would be able to implement their program to some extent without him. And what they wanted was not a strong political leader to take them into the election last year, because I suspect they were worried that a strong leader might have ideas of his or her own and might have been polarizing, and they wanted, to have somebody who would be inoffensive. So you remember I made that comparison last year during the election of El Cid, the Spanish general, who was tied onto the horse and sent into the battle, even though he was actually dead. And, the army follows him thinking, that this is the leader who we're following, and he's actually already dead. But, they're not told that. But, I think that was partly the plan with Biden. I obviously didn't think he was dead or anything like that, but they thought that he was somebody who was leading them in name only. But they would sweep Congress, they'd get control of Congress, they'd change the Supreme Court, they'd change the voting system, they would change all kinds of things around the country. America would be transformed, and they would be in control, and then they could push out the old man, El Cid, and replace him with someone like Kamala Harris. And again, because their power would be so great at that point, and the changes they would have enacted would be so enormous, it wouldn't really matter that much, because even if she's unpopular in person, they would have essentially tied up the whole system and gained control of it. That project failed in the election itself, because instead of sweeping Congress, they lost support in the House of Representatives. They actually lost seats there. They failed to win the Senate properly. And at the same time, it turned out that most of the nation was not really signed up to this program to anything like the extent that I think the Democrats had thought it would. And some of the aspects of this program were positively unpopular and triggered a backlash. So from that moment on, the whole momentum of this thing has basically started to break down, because they don't have a purposeful, strong, dynamic president when they needed one in a situation when the position was, so evenly balanced. They don't have such a person. And of course, they don't have full control of Congress either. And they're finding it impossible to get these massive programs that they intended to implement through Congress in the way that they did. So they haven't been able to change the voting system. They haven't been able to transform the Supreme Court. And their economic program is dead in the water. It's done immense damage because the rate of monetary emission has been so huge, but it has lacked its ultimate coherent purpose because they've not been able to fill it out to the extent that they wanted to because of the opposition in the Senate. So the result is they're adrift and they don't know what to do because they have no plan B. They assumed they would win big last November, and to their astonishment, they didn't.
Yeah, they have a lot of challengers as well in the U.S. from various states and a couple of governors as well, and one in specific, which is DeSantis, which I want to talk about real quick. But first, going back to the COP26, did Erdogan attend? I believe he didn't.
No,
he didn't attend.
No, he didn't attend. He stayed away.
Xi didn't attend.
No.
I mean,
Putin didn't attend.
Why?
Kishida of Japan. Yeah. Well, partly in Xi's and Putin's case, they didn't attend. And it's an outright snub, partly a snub against Boris Johnson, because both Putin and Xi are angry with Boris Johnson at the moment because he's been sending British warships near to their territories and has been engaging in all kinds of campaigns against their countries, and for that reason they're both annoyed with him. But beyond that, they aren't attending because they don't see any point in going. If, as I said, there'd been a strong president, if there'd been a JFK figure, for example, they would definitely have gone. The reason, by the way, I mentioned JFK, because JFK did head a Democratic administration in the 60s, both he and his successor, Lyndon Johnson, which did actually carry out fundamental transformations within America itself. But remember, JFK only won by a very narrow margin in 1960. But he was able to make up for that because he had tremendous energy and tremendous purpose and was a brilliant rhetorician and a brilliant politician. And of course, he had in LBJ an exceptionally strong vice president who was ready and able when the moment came to take over and to do so effectively. So that gave that Democratic administration in the 1960s, you may disagree completely with its policies and the direction it took the United States, but it did have momentum and coherence and a sense of direction. And it was an administration which world leaders wanted to communicate with. People like, Khrushchev and the Soviet leadership at that time, and the leaderships of many countries. They were constantly interacting with the United States because they knew that at the center of power, there was somebody in control and somebody who was able to run the government. Today, they have an even more ambitious transformative program than the one that Kennedy and Johnson had in the 60s. But they have a vacuum at the center, and there is a complete loss of control. So why, given that is so, why would top leaders, people like Putin, Xi, Erdogan, Kishida of Japan, waste their time and come along and speak to somebody who dozes off at meetings? I mean, there isn't much point to this. Remember, this is the first time he's done this. We had all those rumours a few weeks ago that he dozed off during a meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister, Prime Minister Bennett. It was contradicted, but who now believes that denial, having seen what actually happened at COP26? Clearly, this is a recurring pattern. So given that is so, why should they meet with somebody who's more than likely to fall asleep on them?
No, the gaffes are you can't control them, and we knew that Biden was gaffe prone, but I never in my wildest dreams expected it to be
No,
this bad.
no,
We knew it was going to be bad when he became president, but I never expected it to be this bad. But we did do a video and say, how are you going to be able to send them to a G20? It's going to be a disaster. So we called that a year ago that it was not gonna end well having Biden going to G20 meetings. It was going to be an embarrassment for the presidency, for the office of the president, and for the United States. But going to the U.S. and focusing a little more on the U.S. and his ratings numbers and the fact that he's not liked by anybody at this
no,
point in time.
no,
I don't even think the left and the Democrats like him. They say
no.
he has 20% approval or 20 something percent approval in some polls, but I'm wondering who are those 20% of people that actually think he's doing a good job. One of the problems he does have as well, and it's compounding the difficulties of this administration, is that you also have governors who have risen up and have managed their states properly. And the one notable that stands out is DeSantis in Florida. And you also have an election taking place today as we are recording this video in Virginia, where you have the challenger. He is the challenger because McAuliffe, who's also looking to be governor, the Democrat, was governor 4 years ago. So he's almost running as an incumbent in a way, and he's looking to take the place of a fellow Democrat who is currently governor. So the challenger, Youngkin, has had a meteoric rise to, in some polls, be leading by 8%. Some polls. I think it's going to be close. It's going to be tight. But no matter what the outcome, it still is a win for the Republicans and a loss for the Biden White House because the Democrats are panicking. They had to send everybody to Virginia in order to try and get McAuliffe over the finish line. And it's been an absolute disaster. It is a referendum on Biden and the country. And shifting back towards DeSantis in Florida, Alexander, it seems that DeSantis. Did you used to watch the sitcom Seinfeld?
No, I didn't. I was
Have you,
one of these people who
okay, there's
kind of all
there's
I've
an
heard
episode.
about it.
You know about it. There's an episode, and just stick with me. I'll get to my point. There's an episode where George, one of the characters in Seinfeld, George has always made bad decisions. So one day he decides he's going to do the opposite of everything he wants to do. And as he does the opposite of what he wants to do, his life starts turning around. He gets a great job with the New York Yankees. He meets a great girl. Everything is just going super because he's doing the opposite. DeSantis is almost like sitting in Florida saying, whatever Biden does, I'm going to do the exact opposite. And Florida is thriving. I'm not taking anything away from DeSantis. He's a great leader. He's managed the state of Florida. I mean, fantastic, absolutely fantastic job that he's done across the board. But anything that Biden does, he is just going the other way. And it is absolutely working out for him. And Americans see this.
Absolutely.
Other governors in other states see this. And in blue states are seeing what DeSantis is doing. And they're pulling their hair. They're saying, geez, what the hell is going on? And DeSantis is he's managing his state properly. But he's doing everything that Biden does, is just doing the exact opposite. And it's going great.
Absolutely, because of course, again, we come back to what happened last year. Because the Democrats didn't win that landslide that they were expecting to win, not just a landslide in the presidency, we know that was much tighter than they'd imagined the presidential poll. And, I'm not debating more about that. There's more people could say, but we have to be careful what we say. But they didn't sweep Congress either. Compare that with 1964, when, as I said, the Democrats did win that landslide. And they were able to make massive changes. And the point about a landslide is that, of course, if you win that massive groundswell of opinion, if you have that huge tidal wave of opinion behind you, as the Democrats did in the 60s, then Republicans become intimidated. Republican governors become worried. They might start to say to themselves, well, maybe this policy that the Democrats are doing is popular. I've got my principles, but I also want to be elected. Let me see what I can agree with the Democrats on, so that, I can hold on to my position. What's actually happened is because the Democrats failed to win big last year. They don't have that popular support behind them. And that gives people like DeSantis enormous confidence, because they say to themselves, the Democrats who had everything working for them last year weren't able to win big as they'd expected. That means that the momentum, the actual energy, the political energy, the flow of ideas is with us. And that makes them much more willing to stand up to what the Democrats are doing. And not just DeSantis, you see this in red state after red state. They're simply going against what the Democrats are saying. In fact, they're consolidating. The Republicans are actually consolidating in their opposition. And talented politicians like DeSantis at that point emerge because they feel that they have the momentum of events behind them, and they become bolder and more confident and stronger. And as you rightly say, they do that which they think is going to work for them and which they believe will win. Now, I haven't seen Seinfeld, but it seems to me that there's one big difference between George and DeSantis, which is DeSantis is doing in Florida not just the opposite of what Biden is doing. He's also doing what he wants to do. And that is an unstoppable combination, if you think about it. Because if you are doing what you want to do, and you are confident that behind you, you have the support of people, and you do in fact have the support of the people, and it does work for you, you do it better. You actually do those things with even greater confidence, even greater strength, even greater energy, even more intelligence than you would do if you were, if you like, to some extent, acting against your instincts, your feelings. And that's why DeSantis in Florida is so strong. And that's why people are increasingly speaking about him as a likely president.
Yeah, when you look at the Democrats, they don't have anybody for 2024. I look at the Republicans and take Trump out of the equation. I mean, you've got people like DeSantis, you've got Rand Paul. I mean, they've got a lot of good, young, intelligent, independent candidates that they could field in 2024 that I think would be great presidents.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, this is all the political energy is on one side. I mean, the good political energy, and that side is, to be very clear, the Republican side. It's not the Democrats anymore. The great problem the Republicans have in winning is not the Democrats. It's some people on their own side. And we've talked about this so often that, the
Liz Cheneys, the Lindsey Grahams,
exactly.
Mitch McConnell's,
Exactly. It's that sort of establishment wing which holds them back. But, I sense that its hold over the party is weakening, and that the Republican Party is developing strongly from the grassroots upwards, and it's become energized. And as I said, I think it's scenting victory in the midterms in 2022. And it's scenting that the 2024 is the opportunity, not just to win back the presidency, but to end this extraordinary, bizarre social experiment with the United States that the Democrats and the left have been trying to implement. I'm going to say one very last thing about the left. You were talking about who likes Joe Biden. I'm going to tell you straight away. I mean, I read places like The Nation, for example. I mean, I read everything. If I may say, Nation, Counterpunch, you name it. These are left-wing websites in the United States. They don't like Joe Biden at all. They absolutely don't like him. As far as they're concerned, he's not someone who is, carrying out the program they want. They don't see him strong enough or hard enough or any of those things. So he doesn't really have their trust and their support either. they would get rid of him and replace him with a far more radical figure if they could. And of course, they're deeply frustrated that they can't.
Yeah, but we should never forget the lies they told us, especially on Biden's inauguration, that the Washington Monument and the lights were lit up and it looked like Biden was embracing America and he was the great unifier. We have all those lies documented. They're on video. They're on the internet. Every single publication and mainstream media news channel told us that Biden was the chosen one.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole thing was an absolute fiction. I was actually going to use a stronger word, but anyway, a fiction right from the start. I mean, there was no reality to it. Think about it. Think about how people were talking about how his inaugural address was the greatest inaugural address since, well, George Washington or whatever. Who remembers it now? Who remembers what he said now? I mean,
America's back.
America's exactly. But who remembers what? Now, everybody. I mean, you can think of great inaugural addresses. I mean, Abraham Lincoln's too, FDR's, JFK's. Even Donald Trump's people remember and still talk about. I mean, they may be very angry about it, but it made the political weather. Who remembers any of those mumbled words that he quoted on the day that that Biden was inaugurated? I mean, it was all complete nonsense right from the start. And if you remember the pictures of it, I mean, an emptied city with all those troops. I mean, to my mind, actually, it did reflect the reality of the administration that we see today.
Exactly. God doesn't lie when you look back on things, Alexander, because that empty DC setting is exactly what this White House is.
Exactly.
And back then, we may have not have known it, but now we understand that this was an empty administration, an empty president, an empty man from the very beginning.
Absolutely. I'm going to say something, by the way, very quickly on him. I mean, clearly he's worse than we expected and obviously lacks the energy, even the energy that we expected. But I never thought that he was a fit person, a proper person to be president of the United States. I mean, I've known about Joe Biden since the 1980s, and it never seemed to me that he was somebody who ever had the quality to be a president, especially not in such times. I'm astonished that anybody ever thought he was.
He never had the presidential touch.
He never had.
Even
he
in his
never
younger
did.
days. He was never
Even
an intelligent, cerebral, confident leader ever.
No. And nor did he have that finger on the pulse of America that a president needs. He's never had it. I mean, he's a machine politician. I'm sorry to say it, put it that crudely like that, but that was what he always was. He was somebody who rose through the machinery of the American Democratic Party, rose to the Senate, was there for a long time, was brought into the Obama administration, which needed to balance out various factions, but he was never the kind of person you felt should have been president of the United States.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more surprises and gaffes from this administration. We're just at the very beginning of this disaster. I believe.
Still, 3 years and 2 months to go. 3 years and that's right. No, 3 years and 3 months to go. It's still plenty of time.
I'm just going to start parsing through many of Trump's speeches and maybe some of his tweets to just try and get an understanding of what else he's going to predict going forward, All right. We'll leave it there, the Duran.locals.com, and go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code REALNEWS. And also go ODYSEE, BitChute, Rumble, and Super U to find our videos there. Take care.